There's a good spot.
That's the spot, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good evening to everybody here tonight. The thing is that everyone here and also at home, you've all got a story, every one of you. Just think about it, that your relations, even perhaps your wife, may not know all the stories you've got, how you set out in this world, also your children, your grandchildren. How my story, this one here, started was that I would say to my two sons, you remember that race in Sweden or in Germany? And I'd go rattling on about it. And they'd say, well, when was that? I said, well, it was in 61 and 62. They said, we didn't even know Mum then. So how the bleep do we know about it? I said, put it down before you snuff it. I said, oh, that's nice, you know. But this was getting on for 10 years ago. So it's taken almost 10 years to get this out. And that particular shot in 1964, the milk race, I was 20 years of age. I had 14 days of racing, and it's all in here. And
Excuse Bob, could you hold the book up? They can't see what.
Oh.
No, the guys at the back can't see what you're talking about.
which way?
Yeah, in front of
Mick?
your chin.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right, at home. Yeah, good. Right. The thing is, 14 days of racing, and we didn't have a rest day. Our rest day was a 40K time trial. And it's, all the other days were long days. Also, in my particular team I was in, there was only a mechanic for a week. That's the only time he could get off a week off work. We didn't have a masseur. We'd be in bed and breakfasts. They would never feed us enough, being, you know, hungry cyclists on the stage race. And we'd have to go out in the evenings, find somewhere else to get some more food. On the days when it rained, we'd have to take our clothes, our racing stuff down to the laundrette, get that done. And you'd bet every time we stayed anywhere, we'd always be billeted at the top floor, and there'd be 3, 4 floors to go up to get to the room. No lifts and that. All deadly things that you shouldn't be doing in a stage race. That particular year, when Billy Holmes won it, I managed to finish 13th overall, and I was one of the. I think there's one other rider that was younger than me at 20. So that was one of the things, one of the early stage races I was in. Later on, I'll do a rewind, looking round at the old bikes here. My first bike was that I learned to ride on was my sister's bike. I was told at 11 years of age, in the UK, we had what we call the 11 plus, and it used to be almost a standard thing that if you actually got past to the grammar school, then a new bike would be appearing. Well, my sister, she got to the grammar school, I didn't. So I was told, if you want a bike, you've got to save up for it. That's the only way you're going to get a bike. So what happened was that she had a lady's bike, which is very similar to the one over there, only it had rod brakes. It didn't have cable brakes. That's how old and ancient it was, a big black thing. And what we used to do is that to get out into the countryside, she would ride so far, put the bike, chuck it in the hedge. I'd be walking, pick it up. And as soon as she did that, she'd carry on walking, because I couldn't, on the ladies' frame, it'd be rather difficult to sit on the crossbar because it was sloping down, you know. So that's the way I used to get out into the countryside. And eventually, through collecting money from paper rounds, and at Christmas, I say, right, what I'd like is money towards this to get a bike. And my first bike was a Rally Lenton. They did an upgraded one. I couldn't quite afford it. I think it was about £26 or something, the one I went for. And it had hub lighting. I went for hub lighting because in those days, the lighting, the actual dynamo rubbed on the wall of the tyre, or eventually you got an upgrade and it used to go underneath the bottom bracket and it used to go onto the tread of the tyre. But the only thing with that, it used to sometimes get, in wet weather, which we had a lot of in the UK, it used to start spinning and they didn't have very good. So I thought, right, hub lighting. And it had 26 times 1¼ wheels. They were steel. And it had a Sturmey Archer 4-speed, not 3-speed. It was upgraded to 4-speed. Blimey, this was it. And most importantly, it had drop handlebars. So I was a racer and white mudguards. And that was my first bike that I actually bought, and started venturing out into the countryside. The other thing that used to find sometimes with the hub lighting, if you put, I used to put the front bulb into the back one, so I had a really good black backlight. The front one didn't matter quite so much because you could look and probably avoid stuff. But it's, again, in those days, we did have a few motor cars that would be passing, so you always made sure you had a good backlight. From that, I gradually progressed on, joined a club. I saw a national title not far from my home, and I actually joined that club and then gradually progressed on. The next bike was it's a hand-built bike in Birmingham, and it had Campag gears. Campag gears, wow, you know, thought it was a bee's knees. And sprint wheels with stick-on tyres, tubeless. And pardon?
Tubs. We used to call them tubs.
Yeah, tubs. Yeah. Well,
Singles.
tubs, whatever you like, you know. And obviously the 26 1/4, they were precious, big old heavy things. And what I used to do as well, used to put like a Vaseline on the actual, not on the actual chrome bits, because with all the salt in the UK, used to munch away at the chrome and the alloys, obviously, you know. So I used to do that, and then as the better weather come, obviously clean all that off. The other thing obviously, the difference between riding in the UK or in Europe as opposed to here, and that was the weather. The number of times you would get up and think, right, I'll go for a ride. You get out and you think, oh, it only looks, this is in January and February. Remember, it's the reverse way round in the UK. January and February are the really cold months, ice, snow and that. The only time you used to know, you think, oh, it looks all right out there. And it looks so, the road's just damp. It's very cold. The first thing you knew that it wasn't just damp, it was ice, black ice. You'd be sliding. The other thing that used to happen also was that the actual whatever you had in the bottle, in your drinking bottle, you could tell how cold it was getting. When you went to drink it, you couldn't get anything out. You thought, what's that? What's up there? And it frozen, absolutely frozen. Freezing fog. I've seen with the old cables, as some of the bikes, the majority of the bikes here, I've seen when icicles have been forming on the actual cables as you're riding along. You've got balaclavas on, and there's ice all around your mouth. You've got, when it snows, there was tracks where the cars have been, so that's where you used to ride, you know. And then they had the fog, the dreaded fog in London, where I used to live on the outskirts. And you used to find in the fog, you could see a little bit further than the motorists, and you look around and there'd be 4 or 5 cars following you because I thought, well, they know he knows where he's going. And that was another little hazard that we had in his time. Also, obviously, our clothing. These days, you've got all this modern clothing that stops the rain and everything else. But there, I used to have, my wife was absolutely horrified when we first got around. I said, oh, got these long johns, and they were like old granddad long pants. And she said, I'm not putting those out in the line. She said, they look terrible. But you had those, you had corduroy trousers or even pluses, and you had socks as well. And then you had loads of layers and layers of clothing. On a really cold day, you might put a sheet of newspaper up the front. And if it rained, you just got wet and carried on. And yet over here, I hear someone say, oh, it's been raining. And it's getting a bit cold. You don't know what cold is. Crikey, unbelievable. So, and a lot of the little episodes of that are in the book. Also, the way I progressed. Sorry, the book. Also, the way I progressed through the ranks. First of all, it was I ride a club event. I want to do well in a club event. And at the time, the biggest thing was to try and get under 1 hour for 40 kilometers or 25 miles. And that was my big aim, to do that. In actual fact, as it so happened, when I was, let's see, 18, just gone 18, I actually got under 2 hours for 80 kilometers before I got under the hour for the 40 kilometers. So, and that sort of lent to me being very good at longer races and that. And also in those days, our training, obviously we didn't have computers or anything. I used to work out my distances by saying, well, I should be able to average about 15 miles an hour, which is 24k an hour. And I used to say, well, I've been out there 3 hours, so that's 3. Okay, that's 45. And then yet on some days I might have gone even quicker. But most days I used to do these long, steady miles. But bear in mind, in the distances these days, even with the pros, they race for 3,000 kilometers. The Tour de France, just over 3,000. When I rode, it's 1,000 kilometers longer. And we had obviously heavier bikes. The clothing now is beyond belief, whereas we always had pockets at the front, to catch the air and everything else. And obviously nutrition, etc., was so much different. Also, in the book, there's a little quip there about how, a chapter, should I say, how I went down to the South France and training with the pros. I didn't know them. They come in the other way, and I thought, I'll join in with these 4. And I found out who they were. I thought, blimey, I was 20 years old. And in the 18 days of riding down there, I did over 3,000 kilometers in 18 days. And also trying to find time to train. All of us here now, well, I say all of us, majority of you are retired, so you've got plenty of time to go out on your bikes. But when you're working, you've got a family, you've got to try and fit it in. But if you really want it, you want it from there, you find that time, I think I had just over 2 years when I wasn't working. Even as a pro, I was working because the money wasn't as good as what it is now. And I would be working 30, 30, 32, 36 hours a week. Luckily, the job I had was sat on my bum in a drawing office, so that was pretty good. And what I used to do, I used to work away in the morning and then go around with a bit of paper in the workshop and just chat to the blokes and that. So I had a pretty easy number. But on the other hand, I did fit in. In January and February, bearing in mind what the weather was like, I was fitting in 800 kilometers a week, as well as working. And then I was also doing gym work, etc. On top of that, I'd get up in the mornings. My dad was at a comprehensive school, and he would arrange. I do circuit training, and the sort of circuit training we was doing was, say we was doing, in a minute, I was doing, say, 30, well, I won't say as many as that, as 20 step-ups, right? And then we'd halve that, but we'd do 3 laps, going from one to another, no resting in between, one to another. And then he thought on the idea, right, but once I got down below 20 minutes, I'll get retested. And again, I'll be improving on the number. And it cracked onto the idea, what it'll do, it'll get a couple of almost school leavers in with me. This is before I went to work. I ride there and then do this. And before I got there, and they had 3 lads there. And what they would do, if I was doing 20 step-ups, right, he would say to them, right, you do 15. And he said, right, Bob, you've got to keep up with him. And then the next lap, a fresh one would come in. And it was pushing all the time. And people said, how did you put up? I said, but I wanted it. I wanted it so bad. So you put up with it. And it's the same as, if you really want it, you go for it. And every one of you here, I'm not saying you can do a book like that, but every one of you have got a story. You go home today, that bloke was on about a story. Well, what can I write about? There's loads of stuff you can write about, every one of you. I'm not saying you should put it in a book, but you can put it down somewhere for the people that are eventually going to follow you, or when you've gone, say those stories. You know, how did you come out of here? Some of you have come out from the UK. You know, what happened? Many years ago, I wanted to come out, and Peter Robinson was going to help me get out here, but they didn't want me. Who's going to back me on one thing and another? Wendy and myself, she got 2 brothers that lived over here. Somehow I was going to get out here in, what year was it, When? Can you remember? My memory's going as well. Bloody hell. Anyway, it was a long, long time ago. And if I had done, I wouldn't have ridden to Tour de France. It was after the Commonwealth Games when I rode here. And yes, it was even before the Olympics. So it would have been probably 63. I was going to come out.
62 was the Commonwealth there.
Yeah, but it was the following year, 62 December, and then 63 was right after 62 December. So I was going to come out then. And if I had done, I probably never ridden the Olympics or the Tour de France. So in a way, yeah, it was a good thing. But now I've been here 17 years. So anyway, have you heard enough from me, or do you want to, I don't know, ask me a few questions? Like, there must be something you. What about the people? Oh, they've gone off. Right. Yes.
What team did you ride for?
In the where?
When we are pro.
When a pro. Well, what happened? Again, that's another little story in the story. And what happened was that I was independent. Independent meant that you could ride against the amateurs as well as the professionals. They had this in-between sort of category. And I rode as an independent for Falcon Cycles. And they were the top team there. After the Olympics, I turned semi-pro, if you like. And then overnight, what happened was that they changed. You could either revert back to amateur, or you've got to go to pro. And I thought, sod it, I'll go to pro. And I then went down to the south of France, rode some of the races down there as just a solo pro against Alcatel, Poulador, and some of them. Was a field there of over 300 riders. And this was a training race. And they were training races. They're not like the high-powered ones they have now. And then I came up to Belgium and turned for a Belgian team. Came back from Belgium, and before then I met my wife, and then came back, and Wendy said, well, go back to Belgium. She'll work and I'll race. I said, no, I've had enough there. And then I had to look around for a team. And that was the start of the Holdsworth Campagnolia team. I was the first rider, went to, so that was my first team. Then it was, my last team was Ron Kitchen, 2 years with Ron Kitchen. So, and I rode the Tour de France as in a Great Britain team. They had national teams for 2 years. The first year, that's the year that Simpson died. I was on the book. I was going to be riding that, but I had a dust up with the manager, but it's all in there. Yes.
You mentioned about Holdsworth. I've
Yes.
actually got a Holdsworth there tonight.
Yeah.
All along. And they had a shop in Putney.
That's right. That's where Roy.
We used to ride there quite regularly.
Yes.
From Epsom, where I live.
Yeah.
And we would ride our bikes to the shop in Putney.
Yes.
And gawk through the window.
Yeah.
It was a dream to own one. Right?
Yeah.
Never did. And then we used to go to Herne Hill.
Yeah.
Around the track at Herne
That's
Hill.
right. Yeah, I raced there.
And then we would ride sometimes to Brighton from Epsom, where I used to live.
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Epsom. We'd ride down to Brighton
Yes.
and we would watch the start of the Tour of Britain.
The milk race.
the milk race
Yes.
From Brighton.
Yeah.
So I've got many memories of that. And you were probably in the races that I used to watch start. You know?
Well,
So
I
that was
tell
great,
you what,
know,
I
bringing back a lot of memories for me. Just,
I'm
you know,
absolutely overwhelmed by the number of people's lives, not encountered, but that I've enlightened, or call it what you like. They've said, do you remember that race? You know, I finished 24th and you won it. I'm going, yeah, right. And for them, it was their highlight. And then for me, it was, right, I'll go, where's the next race? You know, I was in a bubble, you know, and that's how it was then, you know.
Yeah, well, after the milk race took off, you know, we were still in Brighton, of course, and we rode back home, obviously. And then I remember one year we took the line up that got across the road, the white line, it was a tape, and we took the tape up and I took it home as a souvenir.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant memories, you know, you brought them back tonight. It's
Well,
fantastic,
what
you know.
the stage I won in the Tour was at Hove, which is obviously right,
Yeah,
Brighton and Hove,
Friends
wasn't
of
it?
the
Yeah,
Living.
yeah. So,
Friends of the Living Home.
yeah,
Brought back a lot of memories tonight, thank you.
yes.
Yeah, I've got a question. In that film, there was no closed roads in it. You
No,
were
that's right.
riding through traffic. How
Yes.
did you get on a narrow country road when you're doing 50 k's and you come across some yokel with a
Yeah.
tractor and total load of hay?
Well, what they did, they always had a couple of motorbikes or a car in front, obviously, but then the stragglers, you know, that had got belted off and were on their own, yes, you had a hell of a job, you know. Luckily, you know, fingers crossed, I think I was usually at the front end, you know, so I was lucky that we were covered. And they used to have what we call a closed rolling road. They used to try, you know, within reason to actually have a sort of vehicles in between, and also obviously the broom wagon to collect all the dead bodies and that. And that was usually over an hour, but obviously in the hills and that would go even further back, you know. The thing is that the stages were so long, and they used to, Chaz Messenger was an absolute brute of a organizer. If he found a bit like the Tour de France and Tour of Italy, etc., they've got to go up the steepest. Oh, it's got grass in the middle. Don't worry, the lads have got to ride up it and all this business, you know. So it would be spread over an hour, and they didn't have time. They didn't have time limits. If you finished 2 hours down, say you was 2 hours down, you know, you got up and started the next day. You know? So yes.
Was the Tour de France in that same period run on closed roads?
Oh yes. And we did. We had obviously a mechanic, we had there's a 10-man team, and we had two mechanics. But even looking after 5 bikes every day. There was one day there where the roads were that bad. You had tar finished everywhere. You had to get petrol to take the tar off your legs and all. So that's how hot it got, you know.
Well,
Yes.
Did you ever ride the Bath Road of 100?
Yes, I did.
What was your best time for that?
When I was 18, it was 4 hours It was 4 hours, 18 minutes when I was 18, 19. I might be wrong, I'm about 19.
Yeah.
And that obviously was with the sort of bikes.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the bike, I used to do time trials to quite a good degree. I finished third in the best all-rounder. That's over 25 miles, 40k, 80k, which is 50 miles. No, it was over 50, 100 and 12 hours, that's right. And I used to, generally it was on dead flat roads. They used to get the courses so you get good times. You go all over the country trying to get these times. There'd be designated events. There'd be usually 3 each weekend, one in the Midlands, north and south of England. And you go, right, okay, where's a fast course there? Oh, there's a good course up in Yorkshire there, dead flat roads and everything. So you go up there, try and get a good time. And I would use, on my last time trial bike, the other thing was I had,
What was your time for the Bath Road?
pardon?
4.
4 hours 18, but eventually I got down to 3 hours. Yeah, I got down to 3 hours 52 minutes, and that was on just an ordinary. I say an ordinary bike. Obviously, it was the lightest I could get it at the time.
Back marker, Enjoy.
Pardon?
Who was the back marker? Enjoy or?
No, he was just before my time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm only 80, coming up to 82 now. You know, so I need to be 92. I think another 10 years. I think you know.
You
So
didn't get out on the motorway like Eddie Atkins.
pardon?
You didn't get out on the motorway like Eddie Atkins used to.
Well, in actual fact, I used to look after Eddie, and I used to get him up behind my motor, because I used to live, let's see, Aylesbury from where I used to live, 10 miles, 16k or so away, and coming up to the 25 or the 40k, I keep remembering, Africa, 25 mile or 40k national championship. I used to get him up behind my car and pace him and get his speed and that. So yes. On my own bike, I used to have a 53 tooth chainring on the front, and in those days you could only get 13 sprockets, and and on the crank size, because Miguel Indurain, he was my size, but he had a different engine. He used 180s, and I thought, if it's good for Big Mig, it's good to go. So I tried 180s, and then I went to 177.5, something like that. I tried them then. So it was, and again, dead flat the road. So once you got that gear going, and towards the end, we did have a computer, and it was Avocet. Some of you might have used an Avocet, and all it had was just your speed, and you did have a heart rate, I must admit. And I rode a 160 k time trial, and what I did, I worked out what my maximum was on my heart rate. I thought, I can't remember what it was now, but we'll say it was 180, and I thought, right, I'm going to keep it at 160. That way I'm not going into the red. It's a bit like having a rev counter on a car, and if it goes into the red, keeps going into the red, it blows. And that's the same with our bodies. If you keep pumping it, if you can actually work it on time trials, that you're just below that going into the red. Obviously, the last sort of maybe 10k, you whack it into the red anyway. You couldn't care less by then. And what I did, I kept it at 20 below my max, and every hour I was doing 40k, and I ended up with 4 hours 1 minute and something, and it was the smoothest one I ever rode. The other ones I used to go, right, I'll get out there, I'll get 50k, I'll get 50 miles in rather, and I know I can get it in sort of, I don't know, 1 hour 55 minutes. And to get under the 4 hours, I thought, well, I've got a little bit more time to blow, and I used to blow really mega. So that way, with the computer, it was a lot smoother ride, a lot more even. than if I'd normally done it as I used to. So
That Tour de France road, is that the one that Bill Laurie rode in?
no, he rode the year before.
Before, because
Yeah,
he was
yeah.
British champion. Wasn't he, that
Yeah,
year?
that's right. Yeah, the Australian British champion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah, I
up
rode in
top.
that race. It was round not far from Hammer, and my own club promoted it. And I had a mare of a race. Everybody was looking for me to get up near the front and all the rest of it, because it was my own race. Round Mentmore it was. And every time I moved, so everybody else did. I don't know why. That was the name of the game. But then I was in the Holsworth team and we had Dave Nye up there, and Dave Nye was a good finisher. And also I think we had Mike Cowley for a while in the break. So I was just back in the group, you know. So that was, yeah.
Is that
And
right?
Bill,
Is the Russian amateur Sugarchenkov, whatever, he won the gold medal in Moscow.
no, I rode just thinking, I rode in the peace race when they had a Russian team.
Yeah, he
there.
won that about 4 times.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. Yes.
Did we take any nutritional supplements?
Yes. Yes. I took a lot of nutrition. Yes. Again, in the book, you will find out that I raced clean. I say race clean. The only thing I did take, and that was, I used to go, they used to have a bit like the Western Australia Institute of Sport. We used to go to Loughborough and they say, right, okay. They used to do a little bit of testing there. It was crude when you look back, but at the time we thought it was the bee's knees, like, you know. And I say, right, I'm taking all these vitamins. Is that okay? And there's vitamin C, there's multivitamins, there's B12s. And I said, yeah, we'll just chuck it down, you know. So, okay. There was no guide. Whereas, like with the people who was racing against in Europe, and also especially behind the Iron Curtain countries, the Russians and that, they had doctors who were saying, right, you need this, that, the other. And the other thing I resorted to, I worked out that caffeine, right, gives you a buzz. If you abstain from it, you stop taking it. And then you take it in a race, you think, crikey, what's that? I've got a motor here. It makes that much difference. And in the last 60 years, if they've done one survey on it, they've done about 20. And they keep coming out with, guess what? Caffeine gives you a boost. Well, we all know that. But if you don't have it and then you take it, it has an even bigger boost. So, yes. And again, in the book, in a World Pro title there, back there, Eddie Merckx, some of the big names, and here I am there. They were on mustard, dope. But the way that I overcome it was, I've got to train harder. I've got to train harder, haven't I? And on days, I beat the buggers. And that was my motivation. So there you go.
Bob,
Yes.
is it true, the legend that we've all been told, you were away on the break with Merckx in the Worlds,
Yeah.
and he sent a message to tell the Englishmen to slow down, we're away? Is
No.
that true?
No, it's the other way around. No. Look, there's a book over there.
Yeah.
Go and buy it. And after it,
You did-
the first chapter, as you've already read, is about that race. And it's how I'm thinking, crikey, I've got to miss a few turns. Right, I'll eat at the back so that I can have and he's come back and he says, Englishman, you go through? I said, no, I'm kaput. He says, oh, yeah. So then he leaves a gap. I'm thinking, what's he doing that for? I thought, oh no. He jumps and I don't. I'll claw my way back. And he says, you work now? Well, what do? You can't. You say, okay, And he went on to win that title. The amateur title, I was also in Solanges in France. I was racing in there. And again, he won that. I think he was 19, and I finished in the main pack. And he got away, and his Plancart, who finished second, didn't even know his teammate was away. And Merckx won on his own. So, but for Eddie Merckx, I'd have been a lot better. So I was there when he won the amateur title,
Yeah.
and I was there when he won his first pro title. So, yeah. Right, any more?
I'd
Yes.
just like to thank you for the talk tonight. You certainly brought back a lot of memories for me of my
Yeah.
racing days. You know,
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure to have you here tonight and
All right.
blessing the crowd. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.